Rutgers football is not the same program as Michigan, Ohio State, and even Penn State and Big Ten newcomers Oregon and USC. They're not. They are not a blue blood like Penn State, USC, Ohio State, and Michigan, and they are not a team that has emerged as one of the most consistent and best college football programs in the 21st century in Oregon. They're also not like Washington or Wisconsin, who have flirted with national championships in the case of Washington occasionally, or played for conference Big Ten championships more specifically, like the Wisconsin Badgers have, both in the 21st century and even beforehand. Rutgers is none of those programs. In fact, they're pretty close to the bottom of the barrel in terms of recent success and also historical success. In the earliest of college football history, they won a few national championships, but ever since then, they have been at the bottom of the totem pole. And in order to climb back up, in order to improve, and to be a consistently solid team, Greg Schiano has had a lot of learning, in fact, relearning, as this is his second time around in Piscataway. And he's had a lot of innovation and adaptation and building to do. And it's no secret on this channel, if you've been watching consistently, that I'm high on Rutgers this season. Whether it was my first video about Rutgers, where I said that they're going to win big because they have a good amount of returning production, they have a solid defense, solid special teams unit, in fact, better than solid, good or great, and they have a great offensive line, a good running back, a powerful running back in Kyle Monangai, underrated receivers, and a quarterback in Gavin Wimsatt who has struggled, but does have a high upside and can certainly use his legs. And of course, a schedule that, as we'll talk about in this video, is pretty easy compared to other Big Ten schedules. Or whether you watched, whether you're a Rutgers fan or not, or just a college football with Sam fanatic and you love all my content, in which case thank you, my Rutgers quarterback competition video, in which I praised Gavin Wimsatt despite his struggles, and I think now with the hindsight and retrospect of the spring game being played this Saturday, accurately predicted that Gavin Wimsatt would win the job. Because Wimsatt was, I think, obviously the better quarterback in the spring game. More accurate, more poised. I mean, Kaliakmanis looked like he didn't know what was even going on in the pocket. There were multiple times where if this was a real game and the coaches hadn't told the opposing defensive ends to not hit him, he would have gotten just shoved into the turf and probably fumbled the football. You never saw that with Wimsatt. Even if Wimsatt at times struggled passing or didn't make the right decision, he was always aware in the pocket, willing to step up, just that much more mature of a quarterback. Or whether it's my Big Ten prediction video, in which you saw my official record prediction that, yes, I have Rutgers winning 10 football games, and I think if they were to win an 11th, which is possible given their schedule, they could go to the college football playoff. Yeah, I'm high on Rutgers, and I'm telling you, watching this spring game, yet again another physical Big Ten spring game, a game that involved tackling, that involved pile driving, that involved a battle at the line of scrimmage, that showcased receivers and defensive backs who are willing to get physical, who are willing to block, who are willing to hit, and a special teams unit that, look, as far as I can tell through the spring, is better than most special teams units in the Big Ten, and that's even with some of the struggles at punter that Flynn Appleby is continuing from some of his struggles last season in 2023. Rutgers is a good football team. They're going to take a step forward, and even though there were things that, of course, given their talent, given that, to be frank, that they are Rutgers, that concerned me, some things that concerned me, there were many bright spots as well. You have to talk about Rutgers differently than other schools in the Big Ten. Honestly, like how you talk about Illinois or Maryland or Northwestern, or maybe at this current moment, because of the previous two seasons, let's say Michigan State. But still think Michigan State has enough prestige and talent to where they're not in that category. Or in Indiana. The list just goes on of teams in the Big Ten, like even Purdue, or maybe Minnesota, given their talent, that either haven't had the success or the high level of talent to even compete for a conference championship. Rutgers, though, I think is going to take a step up from that tier this season. And as the screen shows, as the cover art shows, this team reminds me of a Walmart version of 2021 Michigan, particularly on offense, but also the defense as well. Let's start off with the offense, and when talking about the offense and defense, I'll explain for a few seconds, few minutes, why they remind me of 2021 Michigan. That was the first Michigan team that I was really, really emotionally and mentally invested in as a part of college football with Sam. I checked out pretty quickly, I confess, in the 2020 season, though I always kept track of the games, whether I was at work or school or not. Even after I checked out, it was just so hard to watch Joe Milton and Don Brown and that whole defense and really everything about that team. The Jim Harbaugh teams before often had the same amount of talent by star ranking or NFL players drafted as the 2021 team, but they didn't have the same toughness. They didn't have the same proficiency at running the football or even the lethal pass rush, at least in terms of upside and NFL defensive end duo that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo provided. And while Rutgers doesn't have that elite pass rush duo, at least in my opinion, this offense reminds me a ton of Michigan's 2021 offense. Outside of the tight end room, in which I think there's quite a stark difference, and Michigan had a much better tight end room than this Rutgers team did. But the offensive line, great at pass blocking, elite, I would say, in interior run blocking. And they have a running back in Kyle Monangai who reminds me a lot of Hassan Haskins. He'll always fall forward, always churn for extra yards. At quarterback, you have an inconsistent passer, but Wimsatt, in the spring game, I thought did a very good job of not throwing it where defensive backs could have access to the football. He threw it to where only his receivers could get it. Even if it was an underthrow, overthrow, or sometimes a throw out of bounds, he rarely, if ever, in the spring game put the ball in harm's way. And that's a good job to him and credit to him, because Rutgers has an elite, near elite, maybe great at worst secondary, a secondary that I think is full of NFL players. Wimsatt showed that he's better than Kaliakmanis. His legs are a weapon. That's something that Michigan did not have in 2021 with Cade McNamara as their starting quarterback. They had that in J.J. McCarthy, but I think Wimsatt is, whether he's a better scrambler or he's just more willing to scramble or the staff wants him to run more, he's used his legs and, in my opinion, looks better with his legs objectively than J.J. McCarthy did. I think better at designed runs, better at improvised scrambling. He had a nice scramble for a touchdown in the spring game Wimsatt did that was very impressive, with just the fluidity and motion that he runs with, the agility. You see it all. Acceleration, speed, an ability to juke. He's a good player, good at running the football, and I think he's going to be much better at passing the football this coming season. I don't want to make any promises. It was just one game, but a spring game is something. It at least gives the public and myself, who isn't connected to the Rutgers program and can't fly out there to see their practices, an idea of what's going on. And I like what I see at quarterback. Michigan's Cade McNamara in 2021. Not the best passer, but he was relatively accurate, very good at not putting the ball in harm's way, which translated to him being a good decision maker, and he was very, very aware in the pocket. And Wimsatt showed the decision making, showed the pocket awareness in the spring game, except he has legs. So that's a plus right there. And the offensive line, winning the battle at the lines of scrimmage against the defensive line all day long. Running backs and receivers are tough. The wide receivers in particular are underrated. I think that was the story of Michigan's wide receiver room in 2021 and 2022 and even 2023. The passing game was never advertised at Jim Harbaugh's Michigan, outside of an attempt to do so in 2019 and a little bit in 2016, and even then those passing offenses weren't anything special. Last year was Michigan's most efficient and best passing offense by a mile in the Jim Harbaugh era. But Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, I know Ronnie Bell was hurt in 2021, but we saw how he rebounded and he did well in 2022. That made up a very underrated collection of wide receivers. And Rutgers has that. They have receivers that are not going to be talked about in college football circles and by big names. But pay attention to Dymere Miller, the incoming transfer, to Nassim Brantley, to Christian Dremel, Chris Long, Ian Strong. I mean, pay attention to those receivers. Kenny Fletcher at tight end. I don't know how good he is compared to the wide receivers. And that's an area where I'm being honest and admitting I don't know much about him. I know that Johnny Langan moves on. Tight end's a little bit of an unknown for Rutgers, but Christian Dremel is proven. Miller looked good in the spring game, and just really don't let it slip your mind that Rutgers, along with running back Kyle Monangai, Samuel Brown V, who I think could have a breakout year as a kind of a backup running back. He was on fire for a part of 2022 before I think he succumbed to an injury. Watch out for running back, wide receiver, and even quarterback too. I see on ourlads.com, this is an updated depth chart that Athan Kaliakmanis is projected to be the starter. I think that'd be a mistake. I think Wimsatt's clearly the better quarterback. Perhaps I'm wrong in that opinion, but I think he's much better. At least won the battle of the spring game, won the competition there. The weapons, the trench play, the physicality, very much this offense reminds me of 2021 Michigan's offense. And the only reason I'm making such a big comparison, and I haven't done this in other spring games, is because unlike most of the other teams I've covered in spring games, Rutgers has not seen any type of success or even sniffing a top 25 AP coaches poll or any power ranking top 25 recently. No one ever has viewed Rutgers as a contender, like in the past 10 years. No one. But this offense, I think, is destined to take a big step forward, and I think their rushing attack has an elite potential. Right now, it's definitely great, near elite. It's certainly a top 25, top 20 rushing attack. It could be top 10. I mean, they have the interior players, the outside players, the depth, the experience, and they have the power at running back. They do. Monangai is a tank. He's a bear. Whatever descriptor you want to use for him, anything that involves mauling opponents and endurance and toughness, and I mean, just he's a really good running back, really good at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice, to steal a quote from Marvel's Wolverine. This offense, particularly on the ground, could be very lethal. And before we move any forward, I want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters, my Patreon members, for sponsoring this channel, sponsoring this video. And I shout out names at the end of every video for my patrons. And if you're a Heisman or All-American member, you get access to occasional bonus content. All conference members, you only get shouted out at the end of every video, and you're featured at the middle or beginning of every video. But yeah, thank you guys so much for supporting this channel. The link to my Patreon page can be found in the video description or at the top of the comment section via the pinned comment. Just click on see more in the pinned comment and you will have access to the link to my Patreon page. If you sign up as an all-conference member, again, $5 a month, you just get your name shouted out and featured in every video twice. If you sign up as an All-American member, that's $10 per month. You get access to occasional bonus content and the shout-out. Heisman membership is $25 a month. After 6 months of that, you get free signed College Football with Sam merchandise. You can message me directly just to chat or to give content suggestions, and you get the same type of bonuses as the All-American and All-Conference memberships. Your support is always appreciated, however, it is never expected, and if you want to support in a different way, you can visit my merchandise store, again, in the video description or in the comment section, in the pinned comment, and you can purchase College Football with Sam merchandise. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell as well so that you can get notified when I talk more about Rutgers football, Big Ten football, or college football as a whole. There's a lot of prediction videos, top 25s, Big Ten predictions, best players, all that type of stuff that is coming very soon. But let's get back to talking about Rutgers. And the defense, I wanted to save them after talking about the offense because The defense is more of a known, and I thought the offense was more impressive. See, Wimsatt, I think, showed maturity. I think showed growth. I think that he is a more aware and intelligent and talented quarterback than actually a lot of people give him credit for. I mean, people forget that he was recruited as a 4-star out of high school for a variety of good reasons, and he showed more of that talent and growth in this spring game. Again, very impressed with Wimsatt's performance, and I was impressed with the receivers, the offensive linemen, running backs. The offense impressed me a lot. They exceeded my expectations in the spring game, and as a result, I'm a little higher on them entering this season. The defense looked pretty similar to last year's defense, I thought. And they've returned a lot, so you want the defense to utilize that returning production and play at a higher level. However, that is sometimes, I think, the risk of returning a lot of older players. Not kidding you when I say this, every single starter for Rutgers projected on defense is a senior or a redshirt senior. They're all older players, more mature players. Sometimes that's a great thing. Other times, that is, I would just say, an average thing. I don't think it's ever bad to have a lot of experience unless you have younger players and you just choose to start the veterans just because of their seniority, at which point that's not a good thing. But that's not what Rutgers is doing here. Sometimes when a player has reached a certain age or matured or a certain rank, I guess is the thing that comes to mind, they don't have much more room for growth. And with a team like Rutgers, who has very few 4-stars, very few blue chip players, and doesn't have like a top tier, top notch strength and conditioning program or top notch coordinators and position coaches, that could be an area of concern. Is what's the ceiling of this defense? Is it very high, or are they just playing to their ceiling, and that's why Rutgers' defense is so good? But if everyone played to their ceiling, this defense wouldn't be that good. That type of thing. I think that with Rutgers, it might be a little bit in between, but it's so hard to gauge that, especially since Rutgers is again playing against themselves in the spring game and in practices. We'll have to see how they perform this coming season. I thought the linebackers, though, did well. Same with the defensive backs. And the linebackers, by the way, I think that's one of the best linebacker rooms in the country there for Rutgers. Mohamed Toure, Tyreen Powell, Moses Walker, Abraham Wright as some younger backups. I like the linebacker room at Rutgers. And the secondary, well, they did have moments of vulnerability, got burned a few times, dropped some interceptions, which you have to catch those, especially in game against opponents. A dropped interception, as Notre Dame versus Ohio State showed, can be the difference between a win and a loss. Notre Dame just dropped a few interceptions that Kyle McCord nearly threw, and because they dropped them, Kyle McCord and Ohio State's offense ended up driving down the field and beating Notre Dame that day. And that's a big what if. What if Notre Dame picked off that ball and they probably beat one of Clemson or Louisville if they beat that Ohio State team? I mean, maybe they don't, but I imagine that momentum and that feeling that, hey, if we go 11-1 or if we win out after that big win against Ohio State, we can reach the college football playoff. And a team like Rutgers, because of their defense, offense, special teams, and the fact that they like to control the clock and play slow, they will be involved in close games this season. They were involved in a ton of close games last year. They got a close win over Michigan State. They had a win over Indiana that it took them until late to pull away. And they had times against Virginia Tech where that game was close. And those close wins gave Rutgers the opportunity to go to a bowl game. Then they had a close bowl win against Miami. So for a team like Rutgers, who, again, talent is somewhat limiting, same with the resource pool, consequentially the coaching staff and strength and conditioning and other factors. The fact that Rutgers has not used the portal a ton, probably doesn't have a lot of NIL either. They have to be that much more intelligent and schematic and that much more clutch. And I think that this team has that capability, but we'll have to see. Rutgers is to a certain degree they have some unknowns despite the amount of returning production they have, which is top 10 nationally. They did their jobs. The linebackers and defensive backs did. They, I think, in the secondary, did well in pass defense. I was impressed with how many deflections and near picks that they had. The unit just needs to follow through, and I think if they work on the follow through, they will be that much better. Stopping the run and getting pressure on the quarterback, those are areas with some weak spots, in my opinion. But again, just follow through. If players follow through and if Rutgers' defense is cohesive, well, they may not be a top 5 defense, but that's not the expectation here. If Rutgers just fields a top 25 defense and the offense improves, the team will improve. And this defense might even be better than top 25 or top 20 or even top 15. I think they do have a top 10 capability, top 10 ceiling, just because of that linebacker room, the secondary players like Mohamed Toure, Robert Longerbeam, Desmond Igbinosun, Flip Dixon, and Aaron Lewis at defensive end last year didn't exactly fulfill expectations. At least that's what Rutgers fans tell me. Maybe he can have a bit of a resurgence this year. And if Rutgers can at least get one of pass rush or run stop working and playing at a high level, that will be a big boost and help to this defense, particularly the backfield of the defense. They should improve this year compared to last year. And finally, let's talk about how this spring game and what we saw ties in with the season. The Scarlet Knights returned 74% of their production from 2023, and they are 43rd in SP Plus rankings. And while it's not necessary to succeed, it is good to see the quarterback position take steps forward. I think that a team like Rutgers, much like, again, making that comparison to 2021 Michigan, they're just leaning on the defense, leaning on the special teams, and leaning on the offensive line. They can win without having great quarterback play. They can just have average quarterback play. And if the other areas play close to full capacity, they can win a lot of games, and they can be a top 25, top 20. Maybe, although I don't want to be too high on Rutgers here. Maybe they could even be better than that level of a team. It's good though. It helps Rutgers to achieve a higher level ceiling, more consistency, a higher floor as well, and better quarterback play means that Rutgers can utilize other parts of their offense, and therefore potentially, whether it's games against middling opponents in what should be an easy schedule for Rutgers, whether it is, let's say, UCLA at home or Illinois at home or Maryland on the road, who's had Rutgers' number, or Minnesota at home. Washington might be in a rebuild. Maybe they won't be a very good team. And Michigan State on the road could be another one. Maybe even Virginia Tech. I'm high on Virginia Tech, but much like Rutgers, they may not play up to my expectations, and it wouldn't even be their fault. It's just the fact that they're talent limited or limited in other ways. But it would be nice in some of those games for Rutgers to have dominant performances instead of all of those games being close wins. And I think that's what great quarterback play and skill position play can deliver to you. You can just overwhelm opponents, and not in the physical beatdown way. I think trench play helps you to control your opponents. Skill position play helps you to overwhelm your opponents. And while Rutgers is mostly about control, much like 2021 Michigan, much like Michigan football in recent memory under Jim Harbaugh and even before 2020, it'd be nice for Rutgers and make their lives easier if they had an ability to overwhelm opponents as well and utilize their skill position talent. They could have a Joe Moore Award level offensive line, and Monangai, again, tank at running back. You are not stopping him on a 4th and 1. Just put down his head, turn his legs, use his low center of gravity, his body weight technique. They'll pick up a 4th and 1, 4th and short. And Wimsatt, too, he's a big guy, and he's great at scrambling. So that short yardage pickup ability is going to be a strength for this team. If there's a 3rd and short, 4th and short, it will be hard to get Rutgers off the field. your best option is to catch them early or interrupt their flow. Some teams don't have great flows and they rely totally on momentum or explosiveness. Rutgers is the opposite of that. They are all about flow, all about being on schedule, and the run game is a big part of that. Same with the defense and special teams unit, which those will be areas of strength. I think especially at defensive back, also linebacker, but I wanted to highlight defensive back just because the versatility of the position, and that they had several players who could have declared for the draft who ended up coming back. And I look especially at Robert Longerbeam and Eric Rogers, the corners. Pay attention to them. Jai Patel looked good on kicking duties, and Flynn Appleby, I think, had some struggles in the spring game at punting, but overall I still think that he is a good punter, and Rutgers is always going to be solid at special teams. They're very much like Iowa in the way that they prioritize their defense and special teams. It's absolutely critical, though. I want to just focus on this again. They need more explosiveness and strength on the defensive line. If Rutgers completes that, whether it's pass rush or run stop, they'll complete my analogy of the 2021 Michigan comparison, because that Wolverine team had Aiden Hutchinson, they had David Ajabo, and that was a lethal, I mean lethal pass rush. They did. So that's critical, I think, for Rutgers. If they can have a great pass rush or a great interior run defense. For Michigan, their interior run defense was actually a weakness that year in 2021. And I think it could be the same for Rutgers this season. Their run defense was weaker than their pass defense last year. Wouldn't be surprised if that continued onto this season. But if they can get one of those, that will make their defense that much better. It's very critical that either on their four-man front, whether it's the defensive tackles or ends or maybe a mix of both, that there are improvements being made there. The Scarlet Knights, I think, with their returning production, have to break out this year. They absolutely have to. 9 or 10 wins with this schedule must be achieved. Let me show you the schedule. It is Howard, August 31st, Akron, September 7th, bye week. At Virginia Tech, September 21st, Washington, September 28th, at Nebraska, October 5th, Wisconsin, October 12th, UCLA, October 19th, at USC, October 26th, by Minnesota, November 9th, at Maryland, November 16th, Illinois, November 23rd, at Michigan State, November 30th. Easy schedule, in my mind. There is no Penn State, no Oregon, no Ohio State, no Michigan. At USC is probably going to be the toughest game scheduled. Maybe at Virginia Tech, maybe it's Wisconsin at home. Heck, maybe it's Nebraska on the road. I mean, that stretch from the first bye to the second bye will probably be the toughest on the schedule, but there is no team who I think is going to be in the top 10 this year that Rutgers has to face, and that's very good. I think they can easily win 9 games. 10 will be a challenge. 11 is certainly stretching it, but they have the capability to win in that range, and I think with the players that they have, the coaches that they have, it can be done. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your reaction to the spring game down below. Thank you to Crash2488 for being a Heisman patron and sponsor of the channel and this video. Thanks to Spencer Bringhurst, Chris Lane, and Connor Little OH for being All-American members and sponsors of this video and channel. Thanks to Will Loftus, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this video and channel as all conference members. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.